everybody. Welcome back to the Find and Follow podcast, where we are all about helping you find and follow Jesus in your everyday life. We're back at the HQ with the regular crew. Yep, it rhymed. Mm-hmm. Craig and Kyle and Scott here today, ready to go. Excited for a couple of things. One, talking about 23, just some of the cool stories that have been happening. And then two, I love it. Jesus gets into some plain talk, like some straightforward.
Airplane?
Don't think they're on an airplane. Plane like Plain.
Oh, yes.
But not like the landscape, just more of the straight, direct. And it's funny. It's not funny. It's interesting, I think. Some of the stuff we've been talking about with, just kind of frustration with the disciples. Anyways, we'll get there. And then two or
that
three.
Was already two, yeah.
I've
been counting. I use my fingers. 3.
I do need to clear up some scuttlebutt from previous podcasts.
Scuttlebutt. Good.
Episode last week, episode number 112. I've been getting a lot of heat for taking the blame for the Zags.
You should
losing,
be, yeah.
And not my fault.
Okay. I like to blame you. It's easier for me to. It's like, I don't know what he.
You couldn't tell on the TV, but I did my part. Okay.
I didn't.
I was higher up in the stands.
You needed to help everybody else out in that crowd because it was.
I was trying. It's really hard to motivate.
When you come in on the pit because you're, oh yeah, they're up and they're going and it's good and I'm going to be there tonight, and then they lose, man. I feel like this.
Maybe they should play better defense.
Talked about this on the podcast before. Points. You jinx it, man.
Actually, it's not. It's not me. I feel like I did above and beyond for my section. A lot of people sitting down, I would be standing up. A lot of quiet people, I'd be cheering, clapping.
I still don't know if we're being really clear about what we're talking about, but Scott went to the Gonzaga game last week. They lost. They haven't lost at home in like a billion years.
No, but 75 games?
70, the biggest one in the country, the biggest one ever.
In history.
And it probably won't get passed again for a while unless the Zags... Scott doesn't go to another game for 76 games. They haven't lost to LMU at home since 1991.
I have been to games in that 75 streak, okay? So you can't blame me. I was not on the court. Did you see me on the court? Wasn't there. I did my part as a fan, cheering, celebrating, trying to get others motivated. It's hard. If you've been in the kennel, you know the demographic is not real. 2/3 of it, let's say. The 1/3, the student section, phenomenal.
Yep.
Top tier in the nation. The other 2/3,
rich old white people.
Come on, people.
It's it's tough. It's even like the student section trying to get people going.
So
like
4 minutes to go, like 3:53. You could probably hear them on TV.
On your feet.
Yeah, they're like, get on your feet, and because they're opposing us, like visually looking. I mean, there's above them, there's regular fans. But
on your feet, I heard it.
The whole game, they have they watch the action on the court, and then they watch a bunch, thousands and thousands of people just sitting there eating their hot dogs and
their
popcorn.
bonbons,
and so
drinking the beer.
It was fun. It was a good game. Fun to be at. The atmosphere is always great. But
I'm glad we could get through that scuttlebutt.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's cleared up at all, though, Kyle.
That's
I'm
Scott's
just saying,
fault. I'm going to keep on with them.
I didn't make them lose.
It's not a Drew Timmy.
It's a great record, though. Their streak of just beating everybody.
Few afterwards, he's like, I don't think that's ever getting beaten.
Yeah, not for a long time. I mean, wasn't it the UCLA Bruins record? Did they beat them? Now we're getting into the weeds. Who did they beat?
Sorry, Eric, if you're listening to sports podcasts again.
Wooden? I think it was early 70s, the Wooden teams.
If I was betting man, I would.
Yeah, so early 70s to Kyle is on the Google already.
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not? Okay. All right. So anyways, clear that scuttlebutt up, but still enjoy the Zags.
Scuttlebutted it up.
They got to pick it up here. It's been kind of lackluster I feel
like we have to
games.
Talk a little bit about it because we're without a game today. It's Thursday and we don't play, so
it's true.
Got to get our Zags somehow by talking about it on a podcast that's not about the Zags, but it's kind of about the Zags.
So are we trying to help people find and follow the Zags as a basketball team, or
yes.
or what are we doing?
Yeah, that's for sure. A pretty good goal too.
We get no kickback on that.
No,
but. Anyways, we could help them find and follow Jesus, Craig. How about that for a segue?
We kind of are disciples of the Zags, and so, I mean, if it's what we're about, we could correlate it really well. Like, we love it. We're in it. So we want to talk about it and help people see the beauty that is the Zags. Kind of like we love Jesus so much, and we follow him. We want people to know how awesome he is.
Somehow I think you're trying a little hard there.
I feel like it correlates, man.
Very much correlates. Very much. I don't even think that's good grammar right there. But 23, that is something we are doing, helping people. And I just excited and encouraged by so many stories, just even me personally, but also just so many people around me hearing of stories, people engaging with personally connecting with God. And just like me, I think a lot of folks who have been following Jesus are surprised, not surprised, kind of surprised in a good way, where they're like, the relationship is refreshed and they've encountered God in some powerful and unique ways, in some meaningful ways. In the last few weeks, just spending more intentional time with prayer and cutting some worldly stuff out for making room for some heavenly stuff. And like all of us, we shouldn't be surprised, but then we're kind of surprised. Like God shows up and meets us, and He's our good shepherd and provides for all of our needs emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And it's just cool to hear some stories of people getting together in community and encouraging one another. It's been good, and it's one of those things I think, man, let's do this more often. Like, obviously you can't necessarily do all the things because then it doesn't have that intensity to it, but I've just been encouraged by it. And all the students at camp had a great experience. That's another fun environment where they get away and do a little something different than the norm and encounter God in some unique and special ways and hear some different voices and input than they normally would, namely parents. And their other regular youth leaders, even though they were there, they get to hear other people who love God and speak into their life. So, yeah, it's been encouraging. I've been excited.
Yeah, I think it's that type of, you talk about the kind of being surprised by it. It's that you can know it and you can believe it, right? But then you experience it. And like, yeah, I know God shows up. I know God is faithful. I know God is a promise maker and a promise keeper. I know these things. And so, like, yeah, I know that if I spend some more intentional time with Him, something's going to happen. And I know that, if I seek Him, I'm going to find Him. I know that if I set aside time, if I get rid of some of the distractions, I know that. And so we could all say that. But then it's that experience of like, oh, yeah, it's bigger and better than I thought. It's even more than I could even ask for. And so that experience of what we maybe even say we know, and it's God. He's always up to something and doing more behind the scenes than we're aware of. So the more we're in tune with that, even just kind of getting in tune with and being on the right frequency and knowing, like, He didn't change. He didn't start doing something different in 2023 because we leaned in.
Because Psalm 23 and 23, He's like, I've been waiting for so long for the numbers to align to do something.
Right. So the fact that we're more in tune to those things and we experience them is the beautiful part that is maybe surprising, as we know. Like, I knew, but we experience that in new ways.
Mm-hmm. As you were saying that, I was thinking about a story that we have in the book of Acts where Paul is preaching to the people about the unknown God. He'd seen a placard, some kind of a reference to an unknown God. And he says, I want to tell you about that unknown God. He's actually able to be known. And in that short sermon, he says about God that He is the one in whom we live and move and have our being. And for me, that's a provocative, sort of mind-bending idea that in Him we live, and move and have our being. So all of reality somehow, to me, it's just mind-blowing. What does that actually mean? But one thing it means, and the reason I mention it, is He's always been as close to us as He could possibly be. And when we do something like Psalm 23, or the 2023 emphasis this year, it's just us tuning in to a reality that's always been true, the reality of His presence. We have always lived and moved and had our being in Him.
In we've talked about this probably. I sometimes get lost on what we talk about here and in other environments. Like, have you shared that story? Have we talked about? Anyways, old guy issues maybe, but it bears repeating so much. When we think of, I know that and I'm aware of that, or I heard that, we segment it just into like our knowledge base and in our brain. And in Exodus 6, it's the foundation of like the Israelites following God. God is like, here, and that's where we'd go, okay, yeah, I'm listening. Like, no, but here means to let it sink in, to permeate. Craig, to your point, all of us, we exist, we move, we live, we breathe, and then not just to hear it and get it cognitively, but to have a response to it, to act appropriately, take action on it. It's all the same thing. There's not two parts to it. We would even try to, as I'm trying to explain it, you see, it's really two parts. This one thing is two, and I think ancient Israelites would look at me and go, what are you even, dude, you don't get it at all. Like, you're breaking it apart. It's not. So when God's like, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, right? And to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that's their prayer. That's their mantra. That's their foundation of their life. And they would multiple times a day take moments and pause and pray that and respond to God. So when, it's like, listen, like, okay, I'm listening, but I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to respond, so therefore I'm listening. They would be like, you're not even, no, you're not. You're rebelling.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I listened, I heard, or I know God meets me if I pray and if I ask and seek, he'll show up. I'm aware of that, but God's invitation is to join him, to be with him. Kyle, you hit it this last week with, he's our guide, my guide. My guide.
My guide.
You got to say it that way.
My man.
My man. I don't even know where that comes from.
I got lost. Oh, Denzel, bro. I got lost in a YouTube rabbit hole watching him. I think some guy clipped all of his clips together.
My man.
Of him saying
that's
that.
That's his kind of
Just
shtick.
one of his character. My man.
People parody that on that.
Probably.
I don't know. Anyways, but you got to say my guide, to be close. Like, we again approach God with like, give me a thing, give me an answer. And that's how I'll jump into Matthew 16 here, I think, today, eventually. But that's how that starts. Again, I'm just going to jump into it right now. With the people, demand for a sign. Here we go again. It's just a repeat from just a few episodes ago. Matthew 16, Pharisees, Sadducees came to Jesus, tested him by asking him to show them a sign from heaven. Like, produce another thing. Give us another magic trick. Make something happen. And he pushes back on them and says, you guys can understand how the sky dictates things and you can read those signs, but you can't see me as evidence and everything I've done. The only sign you're going to get is the sign of Jonah. And I don't know what episode number it was, it was chapter 12, so I don't know, 4, 5, 6 episodes ago, where we talked about they just wanted, the magic tricks, the provision, and trying to make it relatable to me. It's like, what do I really need? I need that proximity to God. I need to be close to God. So when I'm seeking something, I should be seeking him and not just what he can do and provide, but he is the reward. He is the treasure. He is the rest for my soul. He is the provision that I need. The other stuff is secondary and important and significant, but that's not the primary. So if you want to...
Yeah, because we've been talking about this, again, as we dove into the waiting on a miracle type stuff. I think it's so easy for us to... And it's... The tough part is that there isn't a delineation in, again, Scott, what you're saying, in God's revelation to people and the way people would have understood God. Like, it is one and the same, that God is our provider. He does do things. He is miraculous. And so we need to seek him. And so, again, as God revealed himself to people, that's what he said, hey, love me, follow me with everything you have, and then, blessing will follow. But it's all this all-encompassing, intimate, close relationship with the creator of the universe, the way it was designed from the very beginning. We have made delineations and separated it to where it doesn't need to be, to go, oh, well, I need the thing, and then God's got to provide, and then I seek the provision, and I seek the thing, I seek the sign, I seek the miraculous thing, because he's the one that can do that, right? And if you are the one who could do that, prove it. And if you're not, I'm going to go try to find something else. I'm going to go down to the other religion or the other weird thing, do the dance, say the thing, do whatever, right? Because if you're that God, you can do those things. And we separate these things and create these categories where it's, Jesus is just like, it's me. You either want me or you don't. And I'm the way to life. It's a narrow road. You gotta find me. You gotta trust me. And there will be this, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying it as clearly as it is in my head, but I think we we try to separate things because it is confusing.
I'm always super clear what I feel and think inside, how it comes out.
Yeah,
it's always
but
crystal.
We separate it when it's just like, I just want you to be close to me. And yes, there's provision and miracles, but a lot of times we flip it around and go, I want the miracle. I need the healing. I need the thing. And
I agree. And, what you're saying about our relationship with Jesus is also applicable to other relationships. I mean, how many relationships are transactional? It's just like, I'm in relationship with you because of what I get out of the relationship, what you do for me, how you make me feel. We have that same problem, that same challenge in our relationship with God. It's like, I'm in a relationship with God, I'm believing God, I'm following Jesus because of what he does for me, what I get out of the relationship, how he makes me feel. I love having his peace, his joy in my life. All of that is real, and all of that has its place, and there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But if that's all the relationship is, then we've missed the whole point because, again, as we've been saying, Jesus wants us to have a relationship with him because we want him, just who he is. We just want to be with him, just want to fulfill the very purpose for which we were created, is to enjoy him and him enjoy us.
Yeah, which is all in one and the same.
It is all one and the same.
Because being with him is peace for my soul. It's rest for my soul. It's being with my Creator who I'm designed to be connected with. And so I feel, because it's true, I feel whole and complete. There's a wholeness that he brings, heart, mind, soul, strength. Like everything about us is made right and perfect. And we live in a stage where it's yes and not yet as far as the reality of all things being that way. So again, it's back to that listen. It's like, well, is it hearing and understanding the words or doing the thing? And it's yes. Is it because God is good and we're designed to be with him, or is it because he is peace and hope and love and joy, and with him we experience those things? It's yes. And we shouldn't try to artificially separate them. But to your point you're making is the pursuit of a resultant. Like, I just need joy, and however I get joy, if God's my source, cool. Not great, I'll medicate it. Not, I'll numb it with some entertainment. Not, okay, I'll go try. And joy is the pursuit, but God is the pursuit because he's God and we're designed to be with him. And it's joy and peace, and he's the God of hope, and he fills our cup, and it's overflowing, and he walks us through the darkest of valleys, and he's a good shepherd, and we're designed to live an unhurried, unbusy life, that we don't carry the burdens that we're carrying around all the time, because we're trying to be God and provide and produce peace and joy and tranquility, serenity now in our lives. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Riffing on get a little far out here, but I think my point was clear in the beginning, right?
Yeah, it was clear at the beginning, and then I stopped listening.
And then it got muddied.
Yeah, my brain is,
you kept going.
I had a buddy in college. He's like, dude, you're either like 40 or 4. That's your only two, and we were 20 at the time, right? I'm like, that's pretty true. I'm either like 40,
you started out 40, and
then I ended up at 4. There's always jokes and weird stuff happening in my head. And I really try hard to hold that back at times, okay?
The point we're trying to make here, Jesus made it on one occasion after he had fed, I don't remember if it was the 4,000 or 5,000. One of the Gospels tells us that when the crowds came and followed him after that, he says, you're only here because you ate the food. You're only here because you saw the miracle and you got a free lunch. And you're looking for what other benefits or freebies are coming out of this, pursuit of me. And basically what he's saying is, that's not a good enough motivation.
Yeah, because again, I think that this is where it's hard, because we read the words of Jesus and we see that the promises that he does make, and we see the things that he does say will be a result of following me. And so we go, yeah, I do want the abundance of life, and I want a burden that is light and peace for my soul and rest for who I am. So yeah, sign me up for that. And Jesus is saying yes, but again, it's a bigger picture and a more complete thing that we look at with our intimacy with him as our source, rather than again, the vending machine. What do I do? I put in I say a prayer, I do a Hail Mary. What do I do to get that thing?
A little prayer for you.
There's the 4 again.
Exactly.
Or is it just...
Dude, that might be 40, okay? That's pretty good, though.
Intimacy with Jesus, that I just want you. And yes, everything that comes with it is beautiful as I follow you, as I immerse my life around what you're about. But Jesus just says, come come to me, follow me, and let's do this together.
So I think this next section of Matthew 16 will help us with this conversation, and I think we can get a little more practical on this, where verse 5, then they went across the lake. The disciples forgot to take bread. It's a bunch of dudes didn't pack enough lunch for everybody.
For the third time in like 3 chapters.
And Jesus said to them, be careful, be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. So then they spend who knows how long discussing, oh gosh, we're getting a lecture because we forgot the lunch. Why Jesus talking about bread again? Dude, it was your job. John, it was your job. Peter, no. I thought James was going to
I would love to have been
It was one of those.
In that,
and they're like,
yeah, just to hear them bicker and stuff, that would have been hilarious.
yeah, we were supposed to bring it. I thought I set it out. And then I said, you grab it. No, you grab it.
I think they were like, dude, you guys don't even pack bread anymore. Jesus just makes it out of thin air. Why do we even need to bring it anymore? I'm tired of carrying it in my backpack and my satchel when Jesus can just poof and give us bread.
No, because verse goes on here. Jesus knows their discussion. You have little faith. Why are you talking among yourselves about having no bread? Do you still not understand? Don't you remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000? This is the conversation we've had on the podcast. Yep. And he's having it with them. Don't you remember? And then there was a bunch left over. And he goes, don't you remember the 7 loaves you gathered for the 4,000, right? And how many basketfuls afterwards were? So again, he's reminding them, hey, you're with me. You're close to the guide. You're close to the creator and sustainer of life, the provider of all things. And then verse 11, how is it you don't understand that I was not talking to you about bread? That's that clear, plain, direct. Yep. He's not speaking in metaphors and analogies. He's leveraging the moment where they're like, oh, we forgot lunch. He goes, life's way more than lunch. Let's zoom out and understand it's more than just seeking after food or peace or joy.
Yeah, and again, I think it's in direct context to what he says originally, and I'm assuming that these, the way Matthew writes this is it's later, but I'm assuming these things happened in close proximity to each other. So there's this interaction with these Pharisees and Sadducees who are just like missing the point. And so Jesus is making this point out of that. Hey guys, beware of the yeast of the Sadducees.
And what does he mean by that? What's his point? He's not talking about bread. He's saying yeast.
That's my point, and we'll get there. But so all they hear is, oh, yeast. Oh, crap! I didn't bake the bread. I forgot the yeast. Right, and they're missing the point. So that's when Jesus at the end has to bring them back to, Scott, to your point, like verse 11, like, no, I'm not talking about bread, and you're missing the point because you're focused on these earthly things, and you didn't even hear what I said. You didn't even let me finish the sentence, right? Beware the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. You just heard yeast, and you got so sidetracked on physical stuff, and he's trying to bring them back to spiritual
Maybe
stuff.
they had a bakery, and he was saying, don't buy bread for them. Like, no, he was saying they're teaching. Verse 12.
What is it about the deceptive teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees? That's what verse 12 tells us. Was Jesus' concern. He said, watch out for that deceptive teaching. Mm-hmm. Well, what is it about their teaching that was so deceptive that would cause Jesus, on this occasion to warn them? And before we try to answer that question, I also have this question in the part that we just passed over. He said, I'm not going to give this generation any sign except the sign of Jonah. What does that mean? And I think in both cases, what we need to try to do, and this is important, I think, as we read through the Gospels, is to zoom out enough to ask ourselves this question: what's the larger picture? What is Jesus? What's his thought process? What dots is he connecting? And in the case of Jonah, one of the things at least we know is that because Jesus tells us in another place that just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man. Well, and he's drawing the parallel between Jonah's experience and his own experience dying on the cross and rising on the 3rd day. And so there's a connection there. I think also, what was Jonah's experience about? It was about his religiousness and his prejudice toward the Ninevites. It's like, I don't want them to experience God's blessing. They're bad people. I don't want to be associated with them. I don't want God to bless them. And so I'm not going to go preach, because if I go preach, I know that they'll repent and then God will be nice to them, and I don't want him to be nice to them. That's Jonah's struggle. And again, now to the deceptive teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees, they don't want people to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
They're losing their control over him, and so they have a religiousness and Yeah, there's
I
lots
think-
more to
I-
it, but
I-
those things at least are part of the picture.
And I think
We got
specifically in the context
it.
of what Jesus
About
is
it.
saying in how he answers this is he's not referring to people who genuinely are seeking God and wanting a relationship with God and desperate for an interaction with heaven and going, God, I want you, and I want you to show me that you're real, and I want to have this sign from you. That's not what Jesus is saying. Like, he's talking to people who are seeking to disbelieve on these religious grounds, right?
Right.
Which again points to Jonah and points to these Pharisees and Sadducees. They're just wanting to disprove that Jesus is anything. So they want to be able to go, oh, see, you couldn't do it. You're not God. Or,
Yep.
yeah, the only way you were to do that is because you're with the devil. And so Jesus is like, you're just like this interaction with this religiousness similar to Jonah. So I think that's super clear in understanding that, like, the hardness of their hearts, which then he gets to with the yeast. Go ahead, Scott. You wanted to interrupt.
I was just trying to get. Should we raise hands and like call on each other? I'm next. Me. I raised it first.
Don't talk into the microphone. Whisper out.
Have a button first one that can ring in. I think it's just the issue of he's the Christ. So I think
look at that segue.
the Jonah thing, I think the teaching of the Sadducees and Pharisees, and then as he goes on in chapter 16 here, the declaration of who do you say I am? And Peter says, you're the Christ.
This is such a powerful passage.
I think we got to zoom all the way out. It's the sign of Jonah is that salvation would come to all people, because the Ninevites weren't God's chosen people, but salvation comes to them via the messenger of God. And the sign is the death and resurrection, symbolism, the foreshadowing in Jesus is the Christ. In the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees, of some was he's not the Christ. But others, Nicodemus, he was part of those groups, right? Wasn't he a Pharisee? John chapter 3 or 4? Anyways, he's a believer. Like, he has to be kind of discreet about it, not real vocal, because he'd get, kicked out of the group. But there are believers within that. But there's many, and the main teaching is like, we are guarding against blasphemy against God. That is our job. And Jesus is not the Christ. And they would say that, declare that. That's why they stir up the angry mob to kill him, because they are out to get him. So I think the whole issue and the whole show us a sign thing is like, you don't need loaves and fishes multiplied again. You don't need a blind man to see, I've already done that. And those are all precursors to know who is the Christ. And then you will see my life fully lived in front of the public, but then my death and resurrection. That's all the sign you need. And if that isn't enough for you to believe, nothing will convince you. And so that's what I think Jesus is guarding against.
Yeah, and again, he starts it out there, and I think that it's a little bit, I don't know if he's disappointed in them, but I feel that way. Like, he points directly to their faith. And I feel like it's a little bit, like, this is the way I would do it. It's like, hey, why haven't you got further yet? Like, why we've been walking, you've been seeing these things. I've already started to do miraculous things. I would have hoped by now your faith would be more. Mm-hmm. I would have hoped by now you didn't have a little bit of faith, but you'd follow me no matter what, and you wouldn't worry about these wrong things. Again, he says, you have so little faith. Why are you arguing about bread? Your faith isn't put in me, and you're missing the point. And just understanding, like, he points to their faith is really what he gets at, and understanding, like, we got this. Again, that intimacy and closeness with me, if you're focused on that, your faith should be, way further along. In
verse 15, he asked them, who do you say I am? And that is, as far as I can understand God's purpose unfolding in human history, that is the key question. I mean, what we conclude about who Jesus is determines our eternal destiny. It determines our understanding of God's purpose in creating us. It shapes how I live. It shapes the focus and direction of my life. I mean, it is the watershed question. Who is Jesus? And not only is that true for humans to come to grips with and make a determination, hopefully concluding that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God, like Peter declared, but it's also the focus of spiritual warfare. In 1 John chapter 4, it says, any spirit that does not acknowledge that Jesus is the Christ come in human flesh, that's the spirit of Antichrist. That's the devil's opposition to this fundamental truth. And he'll later on in this passage, as he interacts with Peter and the rest of the disciples, he says, and upon this rock I will build my church. The whole church in the world today exists on the foundation of Jesus being the Christ, the Son of the living God. That the rock isn't Peter, as the Catholics like to say. The rock, it's a different word in the Greek from what he says about Peter. You're a stone, and he says upon this rock, it's a massive boulder. That rock is the truth that came out of Peter's mouth. And we know it's not Peter because just another verse or two, and he's getting rebuked because he's allowed himself to be influenced by Satan. So this truth, who is Jesus? He's the Son of God, the Christ, God in human flesh, the Messiah. That truth is the foundation of his church that he's building.
Yeah. I got a couple of things. One, let's talk about that, the rock thing. Let's come back around to that because I think that's interesting and helpful. But before I forget, through 23, you're waiting.
Yeah, no, I was just the tension you were building it. Before I forget.
We're hanging on every word.
Oh my gosh, there's so much tension.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
No, through 23, one of the things I'm learning is God not my provider? And again, I know that, but then you experience that, and surprise, not surprise, back to kind of my earlier point, hearing people's stories. Do you ever get worried about God having enough money in the future?
I recently retired.
Kind of a rhetorical question.
That was a big part of my process.
You didn't win the Mega Millions or whatever. What, the $1 billion?
Is God not a good shepherd who has all that we need? And has he failed you in the past? And not that our faith is banked on our personal experience, and that's the foundation of our faith. Because again, let's come back to the rock thing here in a minute. But these are rhetorical, and I'm going to answer no.
These are rhetorical, so I'm going to answer them.
For you guys, I don't want to put you on the spot in front of millions of people here.
Millions.
Wow, our podcast
Yeah.
influence has grown.
We did pray right before the podcast.
Hey, let's go. But has he provided loaves and for thousands and thousands of people?
Mm-hmm.
And then did he do it again?
Yep.
And then here they are again without bread and going, oh no, we're totally messed up. And Jesus is like, that's minor. Like, we got this bigger mission that we're in charge of. But for my life, I got nervous a few weeks ago. Will God provide for me the next few months?
You mentioned that when you spoke recently on a Sunday.
I did?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think I shared it.
Or maybe it was during the offering time.
Yeah.
You were on the stage.
Right?
Was that
you had a
last
microphone
Sunday?
in your hand sometime. Again, what conversation
I
is
heard
on
that.
the part of?
Yeah,
I
no.
noticed that.
It's just one of those realities. So long story short, I won a raffle, and it was a free entry to Ironman Coeur d'Alene. So I'm doing. Actually, I haven't technically signed up yet. I pinged our team captain, but I got it through our triathlon team. They got a free entry. I put my name in. I won. So I won. It's a winning. It's a prize.
Yeah,
it's
you lost.
Some people think I lost.
You won a punishment. Is that a thing?
No, I wanted this great opportunity to
be punished.
have this experience.
To torture
Anyways,
yourself.
in June 25th. Well, it just changes everything schedule-wise. Not everything, but a lot of things schedule-wise this spring. And
This is a full
yeah, it's a full
Ironman.
It's a full Ironman. That's what
Wow.
Ironman be full.
Yeah, if someone says I did an Ironman and they did a 70.3, you're like, stop saying that. You did a half Ironman.
You did great. That's what I would
No,
say.
you did phenomenal.
You did great.
I've never done it. I will never do it.
But you're a
I've had friends
defender
that
of
post
it.
like, hey, I'm an Ironman. I'm like, sorry, I have friends that are Ironman. You're not an Ironman. You're half of one.
Well, don't the half Ironman
if you got
people,
a tattoo and it was the full tattoo, you would need to erase half
I
that
just had a
tattoo.
buddy who posted, like, I'm so proud my son can say I'm an Ironman. And I was like, well, hold up.
Whoa.
No, we can't. Sorry, that's just, anyway.
at the finish line, I remember being at the finish line and they declare, "You're an Ironman."
Yes.
They only do that for the full, or do they do it for the half?
Just
Just
the
the
people
full.
who are Ironman.
Just the actual Ironman.
Okay.
And everyone's an Ironman. It's not even a gender.
So you were going to
Bias.
make a point?
Anyways, just changes the workflow and ability to produce, because I'm going to try to do this other thing called massive training for the next 5 months. So I get nervous about not being able to control the future and what's coming up, and is God not my provider?
So let me tell a little story that happened to me a few years ago, and I have never forgotten it. I was with somebody, and I was talking about my being nervous about his provision. It was a different context and all that, but he made the statement. He said, and I said, well, I know that God will provide, but I'm not sure He will, and I kind of know it, but I don't know if I believe it. That whole thing. And he said, what do you mean God will provide? God has already provided. And it annoyed me. I got like mad, and it was like, right. That's easy for you to say, but it's not my bank account. I don't see it yet. Yeah. Well, that really impacted me. It got me thinking, and it's had me thinking for years ever since. It's one of those conversations, we all have a few of those that just stick with us for life. And I got to thinking, and I began to realize later on, God's the God of the present, but He's also the God of the future and of the past. And in His economy, He sees the future. He has already provided for me. It's already there from His point of view. I can draw a lot of confidence in that.
Yeah.
And I preached it, but it's a life of dependence, not an abundance. So when make the declaration, like, God, have you not provided? It's usually because I'm looking for an abundance where I don't have to trust and I don't have to have a true dependence. I don't have to stay that close to my guide, because if I lose him up front, that's fine. I got this whole thing stacked up over here to provide for me. And that's not what it means to truly follow Jesus. And then it's this crazy dichotomy where I've been looking for an opportunity to do an Ironman for the last couple of seasons. It's been in my heart and the desire I've had, and just trying to figure out the scheduling of it and when's a good time to train, and with the kids and all that kind of stuff. And then it's $800+ to sign up for a race, right? Again, Kyle, you'd be paying?
Yeah,
you'd be paying to get punished? That's a double punishment.
Yeah, dude, you give me $850, I can make you pretty miserable, bro.
I got you.
I'll make you miserable for $400.
I got you. All right. Everyone's journey is different, all right? Do the thing that you love, all right? Your thing's not Ironman. Do the thing that fires you up, gets you excited. Anyways, so then here's God providing this opportunity. In that moment, and I'm like, God, I don't know if you'll provide. Like, wait, were you not wanting to do this? And this is a cool opportunity? Yeah, but I don't think you'll come through again. Like, I don't think you can.
No, you fed the 5,000.
You've already done the bread thing twice. I think you're out of the bread trick. We can't, you can't provide. There's a mortgage payment in April. I don't know, man. Who knows? Like, you did it this month, but I don't know if you're going to run out of ability to provide for mortgage payment. So that's where it like hits. And then through the 23, it's like, just lay down a bunch of that stuff. Make some more room and time for God. And there's a comfort and a peace. And then He does, then there's some practical stuff. Like, He's provided this last week on a couple of things. And then it's hard to not go, oh, cause and effect, right? So if I want God to show up and do the things that I'm looking for in like the business world, then I do this stuff over here, like go to prayer meeting or read my Bible a little more intentionally.
Because then I'll get more of the
then
goodies.
I'll get all this stuff over here because that happened. It happened this last week. So then here's cause and effect cycle, and I'm back into that thing. But I'm the only one, so.
You are the only one, and we all feel sorry for you, Scott.
But yet at the same time, I'm like, no, God's our provider, and He's a good shepherd. I'm going to just stay close to Him, and whatever happens, because it's going to be good. Because I'm with Him.
And then again, I think it's that closeness and that intimacy and our awareness of those things, and I think that's what we're seeing, and we've already talked about that in 2023, and which kind of leads me into this week is, what about when we're going through the valley? What about when we're in the midst of it?
Where you don't see a provision.
Yeah, and everything looks like, the King James, the valley of the shadow of death. Like, death is on the horizon. What do you do there? Mm-hmm. Well, David says, I still look to my God, and I'm comforted, and I'm protected in that moment. And so we're going to dive into that, just like, again, that continued that He is near. He is near even in those places, and that I look to the past, and I look at what He was able to do, and I look to His strength, and I also trust that my God is powerful. Like, He is powerful, and that's, again, where where Jesus is going, why are you forgetting the little faith? Why aren't you remembering the power and the provision that I have? Why can't that be your focus? Why can't I made a mistake. I didn't bring the bread. I screwed up. Like, I didn't do something right. And now because of that, there's going to be punishment and consequences and all this kind of stuff. And Jesus is like, why can't your focus be on me and the faith be in the power that I have? And then that when we get through the valley, that there's like James says, like, when you go through that, you come out better and your faith grows
Yeah.
because you kept your eyes on the shepherd, and then you got strength and power and faith through that instead of giving up or going, can we walk around the valley? I really don't want to do the hard stuff. I really don't want to go through it. Can you just lead me around? And Jesus is like, we got to go through, and on the other side, you're going to be better for it.
And David says, I don't have to fear walking through it.
Yep.
And that's, I think, a huge thing where people really, as you follow Jesus, know that he's given us not a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And you can walk through the stuff, and the world would be like, you're going to walk through it, but you're going to be afraid, and it's going to be just wretched, and it'll probably rip you down, destroy you, but you got to go through it. God's got a different way. You follow my guide. You follow him through the valley, and he'll walk you through it. It'll be a different experience, even though it's hard. Like I was talking to a lady yesterday who wants to get back to grief share. She is, I think in March, she said, is 1 year of losing someone. And she tried earlier, and she went to one grief share group, and it was too much. It was too hard. It was too... so I was like, oh, you're ready to jump back in? And she's like, I don't think jump back in. But I think
saunter in.
I'm ready to give it another go because it is so hard. And in less than a year, it's really fresh to walk through the grief. But with God, you don't have to fear, and God will provide for all of your needs. And he's the God of hope that overflows. And even though you have to, cry and walk through all the emotions, he's with you and he's guiding you.
Yeah, and I think, it's going to correlate a lot to what you said, with rest and peace, that he provides that. And I think for us, it's easier. We like the image of the green pastures and the still water a lot better than we like the image of the valley, right? Of the deep, dark, scary valley. But there's that peace and that rest and that absence of fear are present in both, because that's where the shepherd is.
Yeah.
Did they have a valley of death or something? Like, did you get any insight
Yeah,
on that? Do you know?
Commentators, there's some debate on whether it was an actual physical place, but I have some pretty cool pictures of some wadis.
I love a good wadi.
Some canyons in the south, in the Negev desert, where David would have been very familiar with, if not have actually shepherded sheep, of some beautiful, ridiculously deep, dark canyons that they would have had to walk through, and the fear of...
In Eastern Washington, we have coulees, which are similar.
Coulees.
Correct.
Arroyos?
Arroyo.
Arroyo?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in on it. Some commentators think that there might have actually been a valley of the shadow of death, most likely a deep canyon that shepherds would have had to take through, and
nothing grows there? Or were they throwing dead bodies down there?
No, I think the shadow of death, I think, just reference to literal. You were close to death, right? And I'll make the point, but your point, the flash floods, that it was top 5 killers of people, that you could just walk in a flock of sheep through this valley and there's no rain in sight. It's miles and miles away, and the next thing you know, your whole flock gets swept away because you're in the deep dark canyon. Bears and all these
Tigers.
very real
Lions and tigers
and bears are ready to kill you. So yeah, you're in the shadow of death, I think, is what David is referencing in the way that King James. But I think that's why our more modern translators use the valley of the shadow, or the deep dark valley, or a very dark valley that you're going through.
Out at Amy's parents' farm, there's a dump spot for carcasses, so I didn't know. It's kind of it's not, I wouldn't say valley, but it's a dip, and so it's where we throw.
The golf course, man.
Circle of life where you get.
My dad growing up, they had a
things.
pit of where they put branches and kind of compost them. There might be a couple of Kingsley cats in that in that same pit.
That thing's full
Or might not.
of.
Or might not. Hypothetically,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
any Spokane County employees listening, then there's definitely not.
There's definitely not there because there's thousands of acres and critters come find them
I was
real
gonna
quick.
say,
You
we haven't had a
wanted
cat for a
to
long time.
circle back around to Peter and the Rock?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because if the declaration that Jesus is our Christ is the point he's making, that's the foundation of our faith.
Mm-hmm.
God provides all this stuff, and he walks us through the valleys and all the things we're talking about. But what is the cornerstone? The cornerstone is Christ, and who is Christ? It's the most fundamental question that you need to wrestle with. And if you're helping someone to navigate faith and God and what life is about, you got to get to a point where you wrestle with that question: who is Jesus? Is he who he says? Because he himself declares that he's God, that he's the Son of God, he's the Son of Man. He's come to take away the sins of the world and provide eternal life through his life, death, and resurrection. And so you got to go, is he the Christ or is he not? And you have to wrestle that to the ground. It is the foundation of the faith. And then the Greek term, like you'd reference, Peter is Petro, and it's real close to Petra, which means rock. And so making that.
But one means a smaller one, a stone.
Remember the
other one
band
means
Petra?
like a boulder.
Yeah, I do.
The rock band Petra.
I feel like I had a tape
Probably did.
because CDs didn't exist.
But yeah, again, and we've had this conversation many times. And for me personally, when I talk to someone who's maybe deconstructing their faith or was had some sort of religious background and now is out, the things that they are most often opposed to is not an answer to this question: who's Jesus? It's,
Right.
well, the church or this leader did this thing, or I can't really trust because
Or that story about Jonah, that's ridiculous.
yeah, it's all messed up, or there's inconsistencies in the Bible. Or I heard one person say that this, Christianity, all that kind of stuff. And for me, I like having those conversations, and I'll talk about it. But then at the end of the day, I just go, yeah, but so who's Jesus to you?
It always
right?
comes back to
and
that.
not even like who do people say. I think that first question is where people want to go. Oh well, this person said this, and I read this, and I'm well versed in. I'm like, okay, cool, and you can have all that as background and fodder to the conversation, but who do you say he is? And you have to come down to, again, if you say that it's fake, you're arguing with pretty much any other historian and extra biblical text. This dude Jesus lived on earth. Like, that's really hard to
Right.
argue.
Yeah.
So who was he? Right? And we've talked about it on the podcast, Lord Lunatic Liar. Like, who is he? You have to come down to that, and that's the question again.
Yeah, because Jesus said he was God.
And for our listeners who don't know what reference you just made, you made a reference to Josh McDowell's journey. When he was a college student, he set out to disprove Christianity. This is decades ago now. But he came to the conclusion that all the evidence is crystal clear. Only three options. He's either lunatic, liar, or Lord. Lunatic, he's just crazy, and his claims were ridiculous. Or he was a liar. He was a con man. He just
Because again,
he pulled off a great scam.
He said he was God. So that as an option is, well, he's lying about that.
Right.
Because
Or
you
he's
have to
crazy.
look to these things. Like, yeah, the only options are he's crazy.
He's tweaking on meth.
Yeah, he's lying
Or he
about
actually
it.
is-
Or he is who he said
Yeah.
he is.
And Peter and the rest of the apostles, sidebar here, some say John the Baptist? Like they were alive at the same time. We don't have to go down this. Like, how does that, like I get Elijah, like you came back, Elijah was taken up into heaven.
Well,
so
some people that
he
weren't
just
keeping up
disappeared.
on current events, but knew
Like-
that John the Baptist had been beheaded. They're not putting two and two together. It makes
Yeah.
no sense.
They grew
right?
up together.
I don't know, man.
like-
You could be like,
they played ball together. Anyways, I don't.
you could like if you're God, you could probably have like a hologram version
A couple
of you.
of the
like,
disciples were John's disciples. They left John. They're like, we're following the Lamb of God. Okay.
Yep,
They
I
left
know.
John the Baptist. Anyways, we did go down that. But I love that that's the foundation. And to your point, like it's not about Peter himself and the apostles themselves. I agree with you because it's been taken too far, and it's made Peter and other even current religious figures like God and near God, and it's out of whack. Some would say it's kind of whack. So it was taken a little too far, but we don't want to undermine too that their apostleship to get things going and to proclaim the good news and to spread it into the entire world. Peter and James and John and later Paul and taking the good news message around. Ephesians 2 says this, 2:19. Consequently, you are no longer foreigners and aliens, but fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets.
Yep.
Right? That foundation, this rock metaphor, this building of a temple. It goes on. With Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone. In him, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in him, you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I love that. It is the foundation of apostles and prophets and paving the way for Christ, Jesus.
Yeah,
to
I was
come.
going to say that
he is the cornerstone.
The apostles and the prophets, definitely an important part of God's unfolding purpose. And the reason they're important is because they point to Jesus, just
Correct.
like all of Scripture points to Jesus.
Yes.
But to their point, and again, I think the distinction you're making, Craig, is a good one, because we can look at these heroes and these types of things and place an unhealthy adoration on them, right? That we worship them, right?
Correct.
Yeah, they are. I mean, again, what Jesus says after that is the blessing that's going to come for you. Like, again, he's starting this rock, the kingdom of God, the church of Jesus, on this statement. But, I'm blessing you, keys of the kingdom, all this kind of stuff, whatever he's talking to them that echoes on into who we are today. But it starts right here. Like, this is the beautiful birth and growth of the church of Jesus Christ. And so, I think that the point is that when we go, oh, Peter, we worship now Peter because of what he did. Like, he is to be, I don't know how to say it.
Honored.
Yeah, honored and
Respected.
respected. And,
Yep.
I mean, thanked for the beauty of what he did, him and Paul, and the sacrifice and the suffering and the blessing, and it's beautiful. But the point where we go, to anything like this, to Mary, to Peter, to Paul, to James, and we go, you are worthy of our worship and our praise and honor, the way that we reserve that for God, gets very, and like you say, people get that dangerous line that they cross, and
Gets whack.
It
gets
does get
so
whack.
whack, because Jesus says it's me. Point your eyes at me.
Yeah.
And follow me. And because that's what I love about those guys, is they said the same thing. Like, Paul's like, stop looking at me. Like, you think I'm just follow Jesus. And if I can point you to Jesus with my life, awesome. But I'm not pointing at myself. And like, they would say, stop worshiping me. I'm worshiping him, and I turn around and give it all to him. So just bypass me with your worship and give it to him. You can follow me, but you're only following me because I'm leading you to Jesus.
Yeah. One final thought here before we land the plane, Scott. Jesus says, upon this rock I'll build my church. And then he says, and the gates of hell will not overpower it or prevail. And I think a lot of times people understand that scripture in a defensive context. Like, the hell is going to come against the church, but hell's not going to overpower the church. We're going to lock it down. We're going to huddle in the corner here,
Yeah.
and we're going to prevail because
We're in the castle. We
we're
got
in the
everything
castle.
fortified,
We're
but then this massive
and
Lord of the Ring
the
army.
picture is just the opposite, and they would have understood that in that day, because most cities had a wall around them, and each wall had to have gates for people to get in and out. And the gates were the point of vulnerability, that when you're attacking that city, you would attack the gate, try to break through the gate or burn the gate or whatever it was. And Jesus is saying about his church, he said the church is going to be on the offense. And those places that are walled in by the enemy, that have walls and then gates, those gates are not going to prevail. We're going to go busting right through those gates into the enemy's territory, and we're going to build the church of Jesus Christ in those places that were once held by the devil himself.
Yes, and so, it's all the more important as we seek God personally and together in community and pray and ask him to move and to do these things in people's hearts and lives. Just praying for salvation for people to be set free. That's what we're doing. We're on the offensive, asking heaven to come on earth, and the God that's in us, that we're building. We're the building. The people are the building that the Spirit lives in, which I just read in Ephesians. We're the light and love of Jesus, and we're just asking God to move and to break through in people's hearts and lives, in our community. For another podcast, but even was it Daniel who prayed, and like 3 weeks later,
It was Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel prays, and then 3 weeks later, an angel shows up. I forget which angel. I think it says in Daniel. But what did this is a little quiz. You love a good pop quiz.
I know where you're going.
3 weeks though of Daniel's experience. What did the angel say?
He said, the very day you
I was
prayed,
busy, man.
very day you prayed, I was sent.
Boom, gone.
You prayed, I was sent with the answer.
An instant
But
reply.
the Prince of Persia,
I hit
another...
a traffic jam, is what he said. I got held up.
Yeah, a spiritual traffic
I
jam.
hit a demonic presence.
Yep, the Prince of Persia got in my way, and I had to deal with him. And again, time isn't the same in heaven, but he said, I had to deal with that before I could get here. And in Daniel's experience, it's 3 weeks elapsed time.
Yeah. And so Daniel's like, where are you, God? He's like, well, I'm sending help. And then we're like, why can't you just bust through that? There's so much, again, I don't know.
A can of worms
Another
has been
pet-
opened.
But it's
podcast right
you're
there.
bringing up the point. The reality is the fight against the principalities and the powers of this world versus the heavenly realm. And like the Prince of Persia sounds like a demonic force of a region.
Yep.
And so when we pray God break through in an area or something, like there's more going on in the spiritual realm than I understand. And there's moments like that where you go, gates of hell, Why do we need to pray and seek God for his power and provision, that he is the Christ and greater is he who's in us than the demonic forces that are in the world? And we're going to ask God to move and to break through in individual lives and in our community lives, in our state and in our nation, because God's kingdom is on the offensive and at the advancing, and we shouldn't sit back because we have the Christ in us. We have the one who is the Redeemer, Restorer, Healer, and I'm just going to keep preaching, so we should just land this plane here.
This plane is an
Yes,
aeroplane
but
that
it's
we
so
are
good.
landing, not a plane.
But yeah, look that thing
Foreplane.
up in Daniel. That's interesting. It's interesting. So, anyways, hope you're encouraged today, challenged a little bit, and it was
Confused a little bit, maybe.
confused, maybe you got some stuff you're going to keep going forward with. Whenever you listen to this, maybe you got a few more days in the 23 experience, or maybe you listen to it later, and just maybe you'll take a few extra days. Maybe take this next week and take some intentionality to seek God personally and see what he can do in your life. But whenever you listen to this, make it a great day, being the light and love of Jesus in the world. We'll talk to you next time.